One day, a young couple was on their way to visit her husband's parents. They lived in another city and the way was not close. It just so happened that I had to leave a little later and not in the morning, as planned. It was already getting dark, and the couple began to think about staying the night. But unfortunately, they did not encounter more than one settlement. That's when they saw the house. The house stood on the edge of the forest, and lights were on in its windows. The couple thought that maybe they could spend the night here, and they turned off the road. An elderly man answered the door, found out that they were looking for a place to stay, smiled broadly, and invited them into the house. At the house, he introduced them to his wife, who treated the young couple to a pie and delicious tea. The old men talked to them for a long time, found out the news about what was happening in the world. They had never had a TV, and the old radio was broken, and they were interested in everything because they live in the wilderness, far from the big city. Soon noticing that the guests began to yawn, the old man took them to an empty room. The young men tried to give him money, but he refused, so they put the money in an envelope and left it on the bedside table in the room. They left very early without waking the old people. The next stop was in a small town, where they told the innkeeper about that cabin in the woods. The owner was very surprised by their story, because there really was a hotel in that place, but it burned down many years ago, and the owners of that hotel were an elderly couple. The young couple could not believe this, because they had personally communicated with them only yesterday. That's why they decided to drive back and see for themselves. When they arrived at the place, there was only the foundation, blackened from a long ago fire, and the rest of the wall, under which they found their envelope with money. The story is not a fiction and really happened in one of the states of America. This creepy and scary story was described in a local newspaper, but it was not widely publicized, although the locals will be happy to tell it to you. He didn't understand what was happening to him. He had only regained consciousness a few hours ago. Until that moment, there was an impenetrable void in his head. He barely remembered his name and who he was. John. His name was John, and that was all he could remember so far. He walked through the dusty, narrow streets of the city, vaguely familiar, as if he had been here before. He walked along and did not understand why all the people he met were shying away from him, trying to run to the other side of the street, crossing themselves and making big frightened eyes. John was staggering, his body wasn't responding well, and his brain was barely thinking straight. What's going on here? Why is everyone scared of me? I'm sorry, he muttered. Then it was like a lightning bolt in his brain. I have a wife. Lisa. The home phone number popped into my head. He went to a payphone on the street and dialed a number. Long beeps, and finally a voice. Male. Hello. Larson Mansion. Who do I have the honor to talk to? I'm John. My wife Lisa is there. Call her. There was silence on the line. Hello, hello. Hey, are you there? John was practically shouting into the phone. John, a man's voice on the phone asked incredulously. Damn you, John! But that can't be. Where are you? I do not know. There is a street and a payphone. John, describe what you see. John told me what he sees and which houses he is near. 10 minutes later, a huge car stopped near the payphone. When his wife Lisa saw John, she immediately fainted. As it turned out, a millionaire named John Larson died in a car accident 2 days ago. The funeral was held yesterday. The millionaire's memory slowly recovered and he remembered both the moment of the accident and who was behind it. His wife Lisa wanted to get rid of him for a long time, and she and her accomplice set up that accident. She quickly organized the funeral without giving John's body a proper examination. He did not remember how he got out of the grave, but he understood why passers-by shied away from him. It was a long time ago when I was still a child. I was about 8 or 9 at the time, and my sister was 11. We lived in an old house. It was huge. We didn't even know all the corners. One evening, when I was already asleep, my sister was waiting for my mom from work. She heard footsteps downstairs and was glad. She thought that her mother had finally come, but then after listening, she began to doubt. Footsteps. The footsteps confused her. They were heavy like a heavy man's, but Mom's steps were light and fast. My sister was very scared. She thought that someone else had broken into the house. Seeing that I was fast asleep, she grabbed a poker and prepared to defend me. The footsteps were getting closer. The floorboards creaked under the heavy body. My sister's knees were shaking with fear, but she kept clutching her weapon. The footsteps reached our door and stopped. Then she screamed at the top of her voice, "Get out!" And what was her surprise when the footsteps began to descend the stairs. Then the back door, which led to the backyard, slammed. The nurse came down and put a chair under the door handle, although the door looked locked. She looked out the window and didn't see a single footprint in the newly fallen snow. It turned out that no one left the house, but then the key in the front door turned and Mom came into the house. Her sister told her everything and they called the police. By that time, I had woken up, and I was surprised to see how the police were searching all over the house. They did not find anyone, and the terrible story of the sister was attributed to her childish imagination. But I believed her then, because I had heard those footsteps before, but I didn't tell anyone. And then we moved into a new house, and that scary story with the steps gradually got forgotten. I'm quite a few years old now, but I still remember that horror, and I think that something really lived in that house. Something very similar to a ghost or a ghost.